these are all the projects that you sent to me so far, and I opened a few of them on the top already. So first one is this Bomberman Go project. I don't think that the developers are here, but we will still look at the code. So the app was quite simple. It hopefully uses location to move this character around, but you can simulate it like this, and you can leave bombs at different locations, and the bombs explode after a certain time period, and it doesn't affect yet the monsters, but it affects your character. So life just went down a little bit. And I think we just check out to see what is here. So HTML looks very neat. It's very small, it's very easy to read what is happening here, more or less a simple map. Google Map is defined, and the life counter and these kind of the button for dropping a bomb is big there in the middle of the page. And all the code is external, so styling code is in this main CSS, and JavaScript code is in these 4 different files. Now immediately when I opened main CSS, I noticed some issues here, like no real reason for this indentation to have in the beginning, and indentation is inconsistent. You might think that this is not important, but it is quite important, because at times you don't know where a certain body ends if the indentation is made wrongly. So when you start to have larger amounts of code, it may become confusing which code belongs to which nested statement. So this is only comment here, and these kind of several statements on a single line can also be problematic sometimes. I have seen some students put many of them, like that they continue to the right, and what they claim is I do that because the code is shorter. So they might have something like and of course if you have word wrap off, then it goes off the screen there, and it may just look something like this. And they claim they do this saying the code is shorter and it's easier to read. And it may look like it has less lines, but really big problems start to appear when the reader of the code doesn't notice that there is some more code off the screen. So very often it happens that people are looking at the code for maybe even hours, and after 1 hour they are like, that's why it was not working. So it's not really a good practice to do. Keep single statements per line, and mind the indentation. So this is, yeah. And I suspect, so usually students do the same everywhere, so I'm pretty sure we will see it happening in the JavaScript also, but let's see. So I start with the main.js, actually immediately. So I would like the students to be here, so I would like to ask why are they doing this, but they are not. It's a very common thing. So many students do this, and in their mind it is always that it works like that, I do it like that because I remember the way I put it better, or some kind of reason that is only useful for them, but it's really confusing for others. So here this function basically, when I see a line of code that is already next to the end here, I'm assuming, just reading very quickly, I'm assuming that this function has to be over by this point. So it makes readability very difficult. You do assume that this init map function must have ended somewhere above here, because the code starts to come all the way to the left again. But actually, I think that the function ends here. Else statement starting here, and if I look for the corresponding if statement, I don't see any if statement aligned on the same way as the else statement. So I just make a guess that maybe it is this one that probably is ending here. So readability is very hard if you don't indent the code properly. So definitely if you're building in a team, that's the point of it, the project being a team project, is that the other person is going to be like, your code is so hard to read, let's fix it. So, yeah. Okay, but assuming that we don't look at this problem, the map is defined here. It removes some kind of controls from Google Maps. And here I believe they are getting location from HTML5. Marker is defined. I assume this is the user marker. The name doesn't really suggest anything like that, but probably it is. And then some functions for handling the location if it doesn't work. So warning us that the geolocation service has failed. If there is no error, these enemies will probably appear on the map, but this function is not defined here anywhere. So just a little bit looking at the other files, we have bomb.js. Again, reading very quickly, so trying to understand what is happening, I assume that this drop bomb function would end here, only looking at the indentation, how it's being structured. But it doesn't. This one seems to correspond to this Google Maps circle object. So it just means that I will have to spend more time figuring out what this code is doing, and it seems to end here, I think, because everything here is related with this kind of bombs. Am I right to be so critical looking at this at these small things? I mean, the code is working. We tested it before, but do you agree that this is hard to read and hard to understand? I mean, what is your option? What is your opinion here? How about in Kuopio, somebody? Does anybody in Kuopio like this code? Or does anybody do similar code when they work and they claim it is fine? Okay, so you don't pay attention to this kind of indentation issues or now we're talking about indentation, so you claim that it is fine to have it like that. Sorry?
Does this work?
Yes, it works.
Okay, good. So I'd say that the indentations is fairly good, and if you're using, for example, Visual Studio Code, there's an automatically stylizes it like this.
Mm-hmm. So if you're using IDEs, development environments that are more sophisticated than Notepad or whatever, then yes, you can get a better quality code. In fact, there are even online ones. Many of them. I just click some link that I'm getting from here, from Google, and I'm going to paste this code in it. And pressing this button is going to make it look a little cleaner. So let's let's try to compare. This other file I think was the more problematic one. Okay, it seems like the code is actually not that bad. The browser is adding some strange indentations here. So this map and marker here, after I pasted it, appeared to be on the same line. Okay, the person is typing spaces in the top row, so these are spaces, but this one here is a tab. So inconsistency of what characters to use. This may mean that on somebody's computer, on somebody's IDE, Visual Studio or whatever, the code would look like this. So having a consistent way of defining these spacings is also important. But what you are saying is true. So today this is not a very big problem because there are these kind of there are these kind of tools that automatically correct your syntax from the way if you write it in a messy way. So it's not very important to do it yourself, but you should pay attention that when you submit the code somewhere, it is going to come in a neat way, so it will look nice. Okay. Right. What else is happening here? So we have a bomb marker. So drop bomb. There is a function for that. And we have an icon, a marker and an icon that is being placed, and they create a object with time to detonation. So they have some kind of attribute here saying how long it will take until the bomb will explode. I'm curious how they implemented that. Okay, they implemented it with a timer. And the timer is so that after time to detonation here, something will happen. So they are setting the icon of the bomb to this explosion icon. So they have some animated GIF for the explosion, and they are removing the bomb after again some time. So they give it a little time to detonate, and after that they make it disappear from there. They remove it from the map. So it seems to be quite understandable, and the code is heavily commented, which is pretty good. I do have to say again that, well, not again, these kind of nested statements are starting to become a bit too much. And by that I mean that if they continue in this way, like here they start to have 4 nested statements, then this code starts to go out of the screen on some people's setups, on some people's environment. Nowadays, keep also in mind that many people put their screens not like that, but they put them like that. And the reason they do this is because they can see more lines of code at the same time. So more lines of code fit there, and they are expecting the lines of code to be short and to be very close to the side, so not indented too much to the right side. So basically, keep that in mind and try to not have so many indentations. So I'm really beginning to see more and more people use this kind of setup in their office, and this type of code would just make, how to say, well, would just make their screen, if this is the screen now, show blank, show nothing, and they wouldn't know that this code is even existing unless they move the scroll bar to the right. Okay. So how would you do that? How would you, is it always possible to remove these indentations, to get the code back to the left side of the screen? More or less, it is always possible if you define more functions. So if you define separate functions, a separate function for kill the character. So what is happening here? If there is a monster in a bomb radius, he dies. So this code here seems to check player status or give a meaningful name to this piece of code and separate it into a separate function, and here just call check player status instead. So you won't have 2 more indentations afterwards. Of course, problem starts to begin with this set timeout also, because the function is defined here in line. So if this function would be separated entirely, then you gain 1 more this level of indentation from doing just that. So yeah, small remarks, but cumulatively, it means waste of time when people try to read one's code, when multiple of these problems start to appear. Okay, but maybe we try to look somewhere else, some other example. So next app seems to be some Bury Me app. I think, is this your app? Okay, yeah, okay. So now people are here and eager to correct me if I'm wrong. I remember testing this, so you have this kind of screen, and I gave you comments already last time, and you can add a specific berry there, and yeah, and you can search for them and filter by berry type and so on. But let's look at the source code. So, okay, more complicated HTML. this, of course, can be a good thing if your app is doing many things. And I think it is. So you have multiple settings there, multiple things that you can do, not just a button that puts a bomb on the screen, like in the previous example. So having a complicated HTML structure can be a good thing. And you seem to be using some helper functions here. I see this Bootstrap and I see this jQuery. So you are using some external libraries that make
Bootstrap for the front end.
For the front end, for the interface,
yes,
basically. Okay. And jQuery is a JavaScript library. And
Bootstrap needs it.
Oh, it's required by Bootstrap. Okay. Note that you are loading these from their websites. Okay. So you are not loading jQuery from a local repository on your server. Is this a good or a bad thing?
Depends.
Depends on what?
Because if you have no internet, then the navigation shouldn't work.
So now you're talking about internet availability. So if you have internet on your device, then you can load this from somewhere else. But if you package the device on your Android or iPhone, and these links remain pointing to on the internet somewhere, you will need internet for those. But you don't need internet for these anymore because they are available there locally, right? Okay, so copy all of them. Is it a good thing? If you put these Bootstrap things and jQuery on your local device.
Little bigger.
Okay, so file size grows. Is it significant? Because I don't think that this jQuery, I mean, it's a text file. How big can it be? I don't know about the other ones, but I would expect that they are reasonable size. I mean, probably the picture of that exploding bomb before is much bigger than the text from here. How about, what is this min version here?
Well, there's different versions of jQuery, like slim, min.
Okay, so minimized version so that it loads quicker, right?
Yes.
Okay. I would say that if the library is expected to improve in the future, like if jQuery is constantly being updated, constantly becoming faster or constantly improving, then copying it at this point will mean that you're gonna use older version from now on. So it may be that in time your app will not benefit from the improvements that would happen in jQuery library if you are copying it at this stage and never updating afterwards. So that would be only reason to keep it as a online link here. But anyway, downloading file size, it's still going to be downloaded when you start, even if you add it in your app package or not. So at least users will experience some loading indicator there. Okay, anyway. And here, my name. It must be important. Okay, so you're using the API key from Google Maps.
Yes.
Right. Okay, let's look at your own code. So, which one is the main? Is it script.js? Okay. So first one here. Okay, to do better, organize the code. So starts good. Okay. From indentation point of view, I see no problems, and nested statements maximum here is 3. I really recommend having 2 if possible, but 3 can be also tolerable. So even if I zoom in quite much, I still see all the code. There's nothing, there's no scroll bar horizontally here. All the code, even at this very, very high zoom level, fits on my page. So this is a very good indication, and many functions, and the functions have meaningful name, like this remove map or import map or download map. By map, I think you mean collections of berries, right?
Yes.
Okay. This may be a bit confusing because you're using Google Map as well. So you could replace the word map with collection to be more specific there. Like it causes less confusion, but I don't think it's a very big issue. So here this function setMap refers to the Google Map, but this download map refers to berry collection. So a bit confusing, but not a very big deal. Okay. So this is now for what happens initializing the location. So I would separate this as a separate function for initializing the geolocation, because it seems to become a bit long. So having this init map function so long, it means you don't. Okay, another good practice is the functions that you have should fit on the screen, because function should be a collection of other functions called a set of other function calls, basically. So if you start to do too many things in it, it becomes a bit confusing to know what all is this init map function going to do. And if you see here, you have these comments, add berry to map, position marker, geolocation. You already have the name of the functions that you could create of these modules in your comment header. So here you are doing the geolocation, but you could just call geolocation function, and then that one can be defined somewhere else. So now I understand a little bit about what this function is doing. It's creating a map, it's adding a button to the map. This position circle, I assume it's that big one that starts in the beginning when I opened the app, and the position marker. It initializes geolocation. It loads the berries types. This, I don't know what it is doing, so it is a little bit confusing. And okay, so does it remember what I viewed last time when I visited the page?
Last map used.
Okay, so you're using some kind of history
Yes.
here. It's not clear what is happening. So maybe better comment, explaining a bit better what you are doing. But I have to say that this is much clearer than the previous example. So from my point of view, I'm very happy to read code that looks like this. So I think it's good job, very good job. Okay, let's move on. We have some traveling salesmen. I think the students are not here. Let's try to move to some project where the students are here. How about this Yo Bike?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I remember you showed this to me last time, and I think interface looks quite good. So just to remind people, you can buy, fix, and sell a bike, and buy and fix bikes are shown with these icons here. This fixing place and buying place, I think. And you can also upload your own bike to be sold here. And they have a way to filter based on distance to the user, if there is any data nearby. So this slider here, and they can also search for different information referring to the bike. So let's see how this one looks. Okay, so far everybody we are checking is doing a good job at separating the JavaScript and the CSS from the HTML component. It's very common that people stick them together sometimes. So this is a good thing because it means that you are able to work on separate files in a team. So if everything is going to be in one page, then that one page can only be edited by one person at a time. So this is the main reason why separation is important. Of course, other things can be also added to that, but without doing this, it's impossible to work as a team.
Basically, we are putting the classes and you can just write one code for one class, one CSS for one class, and then it will work for all the elements. But if we put it in style, inline, then we have to write it for each classes each time, so it will be good.
Okay, so you are talking now about reusability.
Yeah.
So you define a CSS class, for example, drop-down item, and this drop-down item probably is being assigned to multiple things here at the same time. And you're saying that it's much better than writing here the full CSS and copying it every time.
Yeah.
Because if you want to change it afterwards, you have to change it everywhere.
Yeah.
So that's the whole point of having CSS classes. I totally agree with that. Okay, this looks pretty good. Also using jQuery, also using Bootstrap. So it seems to be quite popular nowadays. This Bootstrap, and jQuery is required by it. So
we have also wrote some code in jQuery, so that's why jQuery is also requiring this.
okay, good. Let's see. What is the main file?
Map.
Is it map.js? Okay. Should be some indication that it is the main file to open. Because here you're calling init map function, and I want to know where this init map is.
That's in map.
Yeah, so I would assume it's in map because it's the main function, but I wouldn't know it's the main function unless you tell me that. Okay, heavily commented, a lot of descriptions here. Yeah. Now these are the places where my previous comments apply. So I couldn't zoom in here to the same level that I zoomed before and still see something. So, okay, where was that? I think there is some word wrap happening here. So basically, these parts where the screen is mostly empty are really notorious. Like they can be very difficult to manage. And then when you're scrolling up, you have to do that again. And some people do use quite large font size. it's easier on the eyes. So same comment as before. It is JavaScript, right? Okay. You have different icon size for the bike logo and for the repair logo. Is there any reason for that?
Actually, the image is a little bit bigger next to the
But you are making it purposely 2 pixels bigger than this.
We have checked it on there, and it looks better in that size.
Okay, and the other one better in the small
In the
size.
yeah.
So some usability usability testing there. Okay. All of these values should be constants defined somewhere. So exactly your comment from before. If you want this to be 50, then you have to do 50, 50, 50, 50 instead of So I know this is a problem I did in my code as well. I did it for to be able to finish the project without moving up and down too much. But I have also problems in my code, and hopefully we get to that also at the end of this lecture. But I think this is good, valid comment. So especially because in my code I use this value much more times. I use it maybe 15, 20 times, just copying 40 everywhere.
Yeah, what we are doing is just we are using that icon swap for multiple, using that for multiple times.
Okay.
So we are using that icon swap and icon byte.
Objects.
Yeah,
So
objects.
these objects, you are reusing them later without redefining them. That's pretty good. The reason I had those sizes reused in my project is because I had that spinning animation at some point, and there I had to keep the vertical size fixed to, maybe I used 30 or 40, but I mean the height, but the width was shrinking and growing. So I had a lot of copy-paste there that I shouldn't have. Okay, it's good. So you're reusing icon objects that you are creating over and over again in your code. This is quite good. Okay. Be consistent with some of these ways you are formatting the code. So function curly brace seems to be at the end, but here you have a switch with the curly brace below and indented to the right. Here you have an object with curly brace to the right. So somehow I would expect them to be more consistent. Here the if statement has the curly brace on the right side. So at least this and the switch is more or less the same thing. So this consistency is important. And sometimes if these lines get too big, do break them like that. So it becomes a bit more clear how many things you are comparing. It doesn't escape from the screen, and it puts them one under the other, so it's easy to not omit that one thing might be happening. Also, you could wrap them up in a function, especially if this check is going to happen multiple times in your code. So I'm not sure what you're, okay, so function called check info. if check info is true, is false, please enter required fields alert. So this is when you're selling a bike, if you didn't put the price there, for example, then alert the person. Okay. And any of these hard-coded links, they should be either in parameter file or in the top as a constant. Because if you move this server, this application to some other server, or put it on the cloud, or some change, then you have to look through the code where is the link all the time. So constant defined once and then reused everywhere means you have to just modify the constant one time. I'm not sure if you are...
This is used only once.
Only once. Okay. How about other links?
Other things, few of them are used for it. And
Okay, some things are defined there to the top. Okay. So what is this parse API?
that is a free server where we have saved our database for bikes and for shops.
Okay. How do you have access to this server? Is it
Using API, REST API.
okay? I understand. So this is example of a jQuery call here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also these, so anytime you have strings or variables, values like numbers defined somewhere, do try to have constants. Constants defined because if you're going to write success every time, you might at some point write it like this. And then just by mistake. And then your app is working just fine, but sometimes it's breaking and it's making this bug that is almost impossible to detect. Because even when you read it, it's like, success, success, why, what is the problem? And then, okay, after a few days of debugging. So it's yeah. So hard-coded values should be always transformed into constants somehow. Here you're updating some HTML, right?
That's for info window.
Okay, for info window.
Content of info window.
Okay. How about something like this? Something like that. And this function would do all this messy stuff somewhere else. And I assume that this is actually the same thing, more or less. It may be a little different, but I don't know. And again, if your description here has a typo, it's not going to look nice. But if you just copy this text one time in the format content function, then if there is a typo, you will see it because it's going to appear everywhere. It's going to be easy to fix. Okay, so I think that these are okay. Price is different, I think, in these two.
Yeah.
Well, again, add the price there, and if the price is going to be null, then price just doesn't appear. So the formatting function will have to take care of these small differences. Okay, so this looks good otherwise. I think that needs a little bit polishing of the code, but it's on the right track. Okay, is this one familiar to anybody? No, I know this one. So this is from Sylvester and from Peter. And I have old version here, so it's probably not very, not that much code in it, but let's see. Okay, first one I think that has icon. I might be wrong, but I want all of them to have some icon during the final presentation. So it's this one here. So it's not the typical UEF logo that comes by default when I upload things to CS Server. He has a designated icon for the app, and it's important. You don't want to sell your app without it. So think about your products as finished products when we finish this this course. Even if it's not with all the features, it should still be there, like looking like finalized. Okay, again, good. So HTML is pretty simple, and some hard-coded values here, but I think that they will disappear in the final version. So these are, I think they are for this leaderboard, if I remember correctly. Yeah, they are the same values there. But let's check code. So CSS, no comments there. Seems you are trying to get it device friendly by using these viewport units instead of using pixels, and also using these percentages here. I think that's quite good. And you're also using jQuery, but no Bootstrap. So that's maybe the reason why the other apps look a little better. So this Bootstrap seems to be, I have no experience with it, but seems to be useful for making front end look responsive. Yeah, okay. Right. So map.js, I assume this is the main function. And is this something for testing?
Yes.
This competitors handler. So what is this doing?
Simulation of racing.
Okay, so you have this simulate racing function, and you load some trajectories from some database. 2 trajectories, so you are using these constants there, which is quite good. So I don't even need comment here to know what you are doing, because I can. If it would be 2 here, I would be very suspicious. Like, what is 2 there? So he is simulating 2 people racing at the same time, because I see here the number of competitors there. I didn't have to ask anything. Now here I'm a bit suspicious what is happening, so I guess it's the name of the trajectory where you're loading, and this might be some kind of a file naming convention. And after you load them, all of them, you have this. After you load each of them, you have a callback function. Okay. So after they load, after each of, oh, okay.
Yeah, I just want to load all trajectories and then start simulating.
Okay, I think I understand what you're doing, but it's very hard to understand by somebody new working here. Okay. So I think you're loading all competitors one by one, and each of them has a callback function at the end. But that callback function is only gonna do something when the last person has loaded, when all the persons have loaded. So I think here you're checking if all the competitors have loaded, then you start simulating the racing. Is it like that or no? No.
If I have all loaded,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to load it again, so I just simulate the racing. And I have quite a big problem with this.
Mm-hmm. With these callbacks here.
Yeah, I
Okay.
didn't know how to do it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, it seems you are doing it a bit in a complicated way here. So load all trajectories has some callback. So you're actually trying to call it again and again until this competitor's routes is going to be filled up. So you might request multiple times this thing, right? I mean, you might request the same trajectory multiple times if this length is not going to be full there. I mean, if the number of items in that array is not going to be equal to the number of competitors, right? Okay, I think I sort of understand what you're doing. Right, so you have some kind of, I will write some different way of doing it, and let's compare if it is going to solve the same problem or not. Maybe we write it here as source code. So something like this. You have a for loop for all the number of competitors. You get the trajectory file name, and you load this trajectory using this function. And when it ends, you put the value in its.
Yes, to global array.
Yeah, so this is a global array.
Yes, and competitor number in this index.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I want to have, I need to check if I have every trajectory loaded, and then I want to call this caller, because if I don't have all, always is something undefined.
Okay, but how about if you load, if one of the trajectories maybe the last trajectory in this for loop is very small file, and it loads the first time, so its index is going to be number of competitors -1. Does then the length of this show still only one element, or does it take this index into account and show that you are already at the last loaded trajectory? Would that be a problem?
I sent this identification I to load trajectory,
This one?
and yes, and load trajectory in this function
Mm-hmm.
I call callback function, and this
This one.
I is competition number.
Mm-hmm.
So yes.
Okay, so
So
this I
I
becomes...
should become competition number.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my question was this: assuming you have 5 trajectories to load, and the 5th one is very small, so it loads first. What will happen is this competitor's routes is going to be empty, 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 and then something in the last location there. Is the length of this array going to be 1, or is the length of this array going to be 5 with only one element inside it? I'm not sure.
Me too.
How about we test it? Because it may become a problem to implement it this way because of that. So let's see. We have a new array. And I put something in some location later. So now if I check the length of this array is 6. You have one thing in the array, but because your trajectory files have different size, you don't know when one will finish first. It may be the first or the last, but most likely it's going to be the one with the least amount of points inside it, because you will download quicker that file. And all of them really start at the same time here. Of course you're doing a for loop, but instantly multiple load trajectory calls are happening at the same time. There's no delay. It's not one waiting for the next to happen and so on. So a little bit, need to be a little bit careful here how you're counting if you have loaded all the trajectories or not. You might get errors with this current implementation. It's okay. The way I would do it, and I'm just going to write some kind of sketch here. I would make something like global variable trajectories loaded. Just that. And this one here is going to still do the same thing that you put your competitors' routes in their position there. But before you start loading any of the trajectories, this value is going to be initialized to number of competitors and decrease every time you are adding a thing into this array by 1. And then you check if this trajectory is loaded is equal to 0. Then you have loaded everything. But I think in your current implementation, you may be calling this big function multiple times somehow. You don't need to. You need to do it just once. Because these callback functions are going to be called at separate times whenever they finish doing. But every time one finishes, this counter is going to decrease by 1. And at some point, when the last one, probably the biggest one in file content, is going to finish, then you do something special. Here, you have all the data in this array at this point.
Yes, I understand.
So they might become appearing at different times, but the length seems unreliable. And I have to say that this was a guess from my part. It could have worked with a length showing just with one element, but it seems it doesn't. It fills it up with empty elements and counts them as empty elements. So just a small thing, but could be a bug. Okay, I think we can look also a little bit more here. So all this file is simply for making a simulation of the race, and it's a lot of work already done to make this simulation, but you cannot test your app efficiently unless you put effort into having testing environment. So you had to focus on this as well. It's part of the project, basically. And here, this is the other part of the app. So, so this is where you're loading the route that they will follow, I think. Okay, so loading the route.
It's just drawing. It's loading by this load trajectory function.
Yeah.
And after that, I'm trying to draw it like polygon.
Yeah. So here you're drawing it. What is this?
It's the calculation of the distance between two coordinates.
Yeah. What is this?
Oh.
Okay, what is this?
It works.
Maybe. Okay. Just by looking at this function, this is radius in kilometers, not meters.
That might be multiplication by 1,000.
Sorry?
Yeah,
That might be multiplication by 1,000.
I think.
This one.
Yeah, I don't know, I guess.
I'm thinking the same.
The result is in meter, I'm pretty sure. I checked.
Really?
Yeah.
I might learn something today. Oh my god.
Yeah.
So the letter E is basically,
It's like
10 to the power.
yes, this one.
how is that even possible? Okay, I don't say anything anymore. I just don't know JavaScript very well. So, good point. I learned something. Not particularly useful thing, but to me it just looks like a bug. So yeah, okay, then it works. So no comments there. But definitely I would like to know how this is working, because E stands for exponential usually, and you can consider it 10 to the third exponent. Okay, but you have 1 here, so usually the base for this exponent is this Euler's number, this A number. So here it's using 10, so it's somehow syntax that I don't understand. I think it might, yeah, okay, move on. I give up. So what is here happening? Load trajectory for racer. Is this still loading the files, or is it just taking from the global variable that you have created?
I think you're trying to loading.
Okay.
I think it's commented or not.
Oh yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was maybe mine. I can't remember.
Sorry?
It was maybe mine. I can't remember.
You mean you tried to have
Yeah.
a separate loading? Okay. If you guys are having trouble with some of these things like the callbacks or whatever, just send to me the problem, and we can take a look, because this simulating is not straightforward how to do. So I could help if needed. But anyway, I don't have many comments, so code looks good. Mostly. Some of these things like similar comments as before, but not very big. I could still give. But yeah, I think it's fine. We can move to some other project. And okay. Let's look also at this one with the traveling salesman. If you remember, it is this one where you enter some kind of addresses, and then it's going to show them on the map, and it tells you how to visit them. In the best possible order. So let's see how this code looks like. Again, very good, this HTML separated from the other source files. I don't know where the start is. Oh yeah, main page JS, script main page JS. Okay, so this one doesn't have this kind of indentation problem. It's starting already in the beginning, no tabs or spaces there. And all variables, well, no, I don't know if all variables, but quite many variables are defined on the left. They use constants for, meaningful constants for a lot of things. And they have long names. So some people like to give names of variables short, like I, J, or threshold for user visiting location would be maybe something like that. I think that it is easier to read code if you are giving these kind of long constants. Problem can be just that it becomes a long line again, so then the text would become hard to see, especially if you use something like if something like that, then it does go outside of the screen quite easily, but you can always do this kind of breaking of multiple checks on different lines. So I think it makes it much easier to understand what the code is doing if the variables are very well defined. Yeah, so I think this code looks very good already from the beginning, and I have good feeling about it. So very well defined variables, even comments explaining where it is important. And main function, so this is what I mentioned to you before. So main function is very small. It fits in one page, and it calls other kind of functions. So it doesn't do this kind of geolocation itself embedded in it. So I can move from one function to the next and read basically what this main function is going to do by just checking these function calls from here. And then the init map function is here. So this one is the first function being called there. Make marker unvisited. So this probably happens when you visit the marker and you don't want to have it in the list anymore. Very clear. It has the map parameter, the position, title and color. So seems to be I don't think this color is being used anywhere. So probably some work still needs to happen there. The marker is blue, seems to be here in the text, but the parameter is not used anywhere. And some of these marker sizes can be also defined up there in the in this section. So that would be useful. Here it starts to look a little messy. So this function for initializing user location is doing maybe too many things. It's initializing the location, it's creating a marker. So initialize user location shouldn't have anything to do with marker, so the name is improper. Once the location is given, you might want to plot it on the map. So that would be a separate function that handles the visualization of the location. And here it even combines this if location is not set manually. So this location manually is used for debugging. The user's location can be changed by dragging the marker. So this basically means that they are simulating user movement also, but again, in the function that handles the function that initializes user location, I am expecting to see just the real location here. So separate function to handle this debugging case would be needed entirely. And that's why it's getting all of these indentations here. It's just trying to do too many things. Displaying things on the map, getting location from the geolocation component of HTML5 and allowing this fake location at the same time. So this is bad example over here. So you can find good and bad examples everywhere basically. But decent amount of comments, or maybe even too many. And functions are pretty small. Some of them are big, but most of them fit on one page just fine. So it's one of the good coding examples here. And I wanted to look at it because this one has, I think, the most amount of source code that we have so far. So I was expecting some messy things here, but it looks quite good. Okay, this might be some problem here. I don't know what compute TSP continue means. So some hard-coded variables here. So it may be that this function is not used anymore and was used for debugging or something. Okay. I think this is it for today. We didn't have time to look at my code, but did I have exercise task for this week? Okay. So on Friday, your job is to point out these problems in the Where's Mopsy source code, and we can look at other problems also then during the exercise class. Do you have any questions, comments about this kind of what happened today? Is it do you agree with most of the things? You don't have to agree with everything, but I think they are valid points that one should take into consideration when writing. Okay, I think that's it.